because they are related in some ways. So, and I think we all know how important that is. You know, when you don't press on, what happens? You quit. Okay, you quit. You don't grow. You stay where you are. A lot of different answers. Like Rick said, you quit. You don't grow. You don't get any better. I think we all know. Sometimes it's hard for us, but I think we all know that we can't be satisfied. We can't be satisfied with where we are spiritually, and we can't be satisfied with where we are in life. Okay, Bible teaches that. There is biblical on that. Is that that's what it says. How important is pressing on in life? It's very important. Okay, Paul stresses it here. Spiritually, it's very important. Both things. Rick used the word quit. Does that mean when you press on, does that mean every day you press on the same amount? We're all human. What do we have? We have good days and bad days, right, Jody? We have good days and bad days. So pressing on doesn't mean you're going 110 miles an hour every day. And we all get tired. But like Rick said, we don't quit. The opposite of pressing on is quitting. Every day you do a little bit. Okay, that's how you keep going, is that you just keep doing a little bit. There may be a day where you don't do too much, and there may be a whole week. Maybe you're down or something. You do a little bit every day. How do you keep your house clean? How do you do whatever with all these things out there? You do a little bit at a time. Okay, you do a little bit at a time. There's an old saying that kind of goes along with it. You all heard it. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay, one bite at a time. You can't eat it. You can't eat an elephant in one bite. Well, kind of silly. I don't know where that came from. As far as I know, nobody eats elephants. But anyway, I don't know where that came from. But it makes a point, though. It does make a good point. Is that that's how you learn more about the Bible. That's how you study the Bible. If you've never studied the Bible, or you've maybe taken some time off, you need to get back into it. Are you going to take 2 or 3 days and sit and study the Bible 8 hours a day? Probably not. Not many people do that. But you just work at it. You do a little bit at a time. All right? And as always, jump in. Don't wait for me to ask. Jump in anytime you got something.
For me, the overall point of pressing on, Paul makes it, who doesn't need to be doing it, because
Yeah.
you think if there was anybody that was any more could be more confident, who would it be more so than Paul? He had met the Lord, he had dedicated his life, and yet he saw a need. I keep coming back, we used it a few times, but I keep coming back to Dorian's statement to share it with we're going to spread to the finish line.
Yep.
I think if all needed to press on, I'm pretty sure I did.
And Paul doesn't use that, a lot of what you said he does, but he doesn't use that in these verses, but Paul does use finishing the race quite a bit. That's not in this section, but Paul talks about many times, I've fought the good fight, I've finished the race, let's get to the finish, let's don't stop before we get to the finish. Because we all know what happens when you stop. You don't stay stagnant. You go backwards. There's no okay, I've got to this point and I'm stopping, and I know all I need to know about the Bible. Anybody, obviously, raise your hand if you know all you need to know about the Bible. Go ahead, Paul.
I think with a physical body, you call that atrophy.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
You don't use it.
That's right. It's not going to stay the same. It's not going to stay the same. It's going to get worse. If you do whatever it is, whatever physical activity you do, you get where your body's used to it. You stop it for about 6 months. What's going to happen the first day you do it again? It's going to be bad. One of the sorest I've ever been, and I didn't even think about it, it wasn't that hard. I helped the guy, I've only done this once or twice in my life, I helped the guy pour a concrete driveway. Now, I say help pour, I didn't pour anything. But we crouched over and we took the 2x4 and we drug it across, to level it out. So I was kind of crouched down, and I was doing that a little bit, and we did so. I almost couldn't walk the next day. I mean, and it wasn't hard work. It wasn't like, it wasn't real intrusive labor, but I was using muscles and positions in my body I hadn't used. And, I thought I couldn't get out of bed the next day. So once again, there we go. That's what happens when we stop. Spiritually too, it's easy to see it in our lives. We see it in our lives. You quit cleaning up your house, what happens? How long does it take? It doesn't take long, does it, till your house is a mess, okay? You stop cleaning your house. It's easy to see in our lives, your car, whatever, It's a little harder to see in our spiritual life. We get distracted, and that clutter that builds up in our minds from not studying the Bible, it's not as easy to see as the dust in our house. It's not as easy to see as our muscles getting sore when we don't do something for a long time. Our spiritual spot, our spiritual point of pressing on is not as easy to see as the physical. So we really have to think about it. We really have to keep it in our mindset. We talked about moving on. There is no staying stagnant. I thought about, and I don't know a lot about this, but I've read a little bit, and you all have too, and Stan's talked about it a little bit before. The stone of Ebenezer. When you set down a stone of Ebenezer, what does that mean?
This is how far I've come.
So far, that's right. This is where we have come so far. Even if we get driven back, we've been this far. But what do you do then? You keep going, okay? You keep going. Once you put down your stone of Ebenezer, you keep going. And there's nothing wrong with putting that down. You can put that down on your spiritual life and say, here's where I am, here's what I've done, here's what I've accomplished. But then you forget about that. You don't think about that anymore, and you move on, okay? You move on. We never stop growing. We never stop maturing in Christ. There's always more to learn. And there's always, I want to make this point too, and I want to see if you have any comments on this. Not only is there more to learn, there's different ways to look at things, okay? Many of us in here, and I think almost all of us in here, have studied the Bible almost all of our lives. It may be in different ways, in different amounts and times and all that. But we've studied the Bible all our lives. But do you look at the same thing now? Do you look at it the same way now you did 20 years ago? Hope not. That's right. Hopefully you have. That's right. The Bible doesn't change, but our understanding of it does. Okay? Our understanding of it does. I have heard a lot of preachers, and I won't say everyone, I've heard a lot of preachers say, and I'll just give you one of the, Jerry Mays used to say it all the time. Jerry Mays used to say he would go back and look at, of course this was before when Jerry started preaching, we weren't videotaping the sermons and things like that, but he'd go back and look at his old lessons and he would say, oh me, he would shake his head, oh, I can't believe I preached that, I can't believe I preached it. Well, at the time, what? He thought it was, he believed it, and he, whatever emphasized, whatever it was, So we learn. So it's not just about adding to our knowledge. It's about our discernment. All right, it's about our discernment. We're going to talk about God revealing things to us, and I don't want to get on a big, I don't know what kind of discussion you'd call it. But I believe that God reveals things to us. We know He did in the New Testament, Jesus especially, and even in the Old Testament. We know that there were times when Jesus revealed things to people, things they didn't know, okay? I don't know how that works today, but I believe, and this is just me, I believe that things sometimes are revealed to us over time in our study, that maybe we're not mature enough to handle it at some point. But when we are, God turns on a light bulb and lets us see it. Now that's a little odd, maybe. Thoughts on that? Anybody agree or disagree or have anything to add to that?
I think sometimes you're just not mature enough to know, to realize what it's really saying.
Absolutely. That's exactly what spiritual maturity. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Anybody else?
Well, I just think we have to be very cautious. I've heard two individuals that have spent years preaching talk about as they've grown older and as they study, they're like Jerry Mays. Their thoughts and things that they really believed, I would through the years. But I worry is, we only need to let the word of God change us in our
Right.
thoughts, and we need to make sure we're right. Sometimes the world is influencing
Yeah.
that, so we have to be careful.
Good point. Good point. That's a good point. That's right. That's right. If enough people believe it, well, I might as well believe it too, and that's not the way we need to be. Okay. Maturity leads to pressing on. Okay. Ms. Margaret mentioned maturity. Spiritual maturity leads to pressing on. Spiritual maturity tells you, I've got more to learn. I need to keep going. I need to keep growing. Okay. Spiritual immaturity says what? I'm there. Yeah, I've got it. All this. I know all this. You know, I've got all this. That's the difference. Look on the bottom of page 81. There's a verse in Revelation that goes along with this. I think pretty well that the author includes in here. I think it's chapter 3, 17 and 18. I'm going to read that. Starts on the bottom of page 81. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. All right. Well, there's a interesting, I guess, counterpoint in here. You say I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing. Obviously, whoever the church or whoever they're talking to here really believes that. So how can someone think they're wealthy, rich, and have need of nothing, but really, in truth, be wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked? How can you be that far off? Well, it's when you get arrogant, it's when you get satisfied, and you say, I've got these things. Just an example, the man who's going to build bigger barns. I'm going to tear down these barns and build bigger ones, and here's what I'm going to do in the future. Was he wealthy? Physically, yes. Earthly, yes. He was wealthy. Spiritually, he was wretched, miserable, blind, poor, and naked. Okay? So that's what we've got to look at here. If we sit back on our laurels and say, I've got it, I know it all, or I've got everything I need, then that's when we are told that we don't. And I love what we could make more, we could include this as more of the lesson. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire. You use your money to go to buy from me gold refined in the fire. That's not real gold. That's knowledge, that you may be rich, white garments, that you may be clothed. Okay, so that's where and once again, using a lot of other verses than what Paul talks about here. Where are we to store up treasures for ourselves? In heaven. Okay, we're to store up treasures for ourselves in heaven, not on earth. And that's what this is talking about here. That's what that verse in Revelation is kind of adhering to that. We have got, no matter what we've got here on this earth, it doesn't constitute what we're going to have in heaven. We have to. It's the spiritual part that does that. So we've become blind. We've become blind to what we really need. I think the apostles are an interesting story. When we talk about growing and we talk about keep going, look at the story of the apostles. They walked with Jesus daily. So obviously they didn't mess up, Jody. Obviously they didn't have any problems, did they? They were with Jesus every day. No, what do we learn? They had the same issue. They had disbelief. They had misunderstanding. Now I will say this. I was thinking about this as I was making the lesson. I think the apostles sometimes get a bad rap because you look at what they did and the way they lived, and you say, some people say, they were with Jesus every day. How did they not get it? How did they not get it? Well, guess what? They were getting it a little piece at a time. What have we got? We got it all at once, okay? We got the whole story. It's a little easier to understand. So don't think sometimes I think the apostles get a bad rap, because it does seem like, they were Jesus, they should have a better grasp on it, but they didn't see the big picture. When you can see the big picture, it's different. But I think their story still applies to what we're talking about today. I think the story of what happened to Peter after Jesus died, was reborn, appeared to him, all those things. Would you call Peter more mature in the years after Jesus was gone? I think we would, David. I think we see from Peter's preaching and from his writing, he matured. Even after all those years he walked with Jesus, he understood. And we know what the Scripture tells us about Jesus opening their eyes, and at certain times opening their eyes. So, even as the apostles matured, they kept on growing and they kept on getting better, even though they were with Jesus for a long time. Any thoughts on that? Any discussion on any of it? Well, when we press on, we definitely seek more, and when we press on, we look to obtain a goal. Not everything in life is about obtaining a goal. You don't press on to obtaining a goal. I've used this example several times. I don't know why this example stuck in my head, but when you clean your house, the goal is to get your house clean. Do you ever believe that once you get it clean, it's going to stay clean? Okay? No.
My neighbor, Jolene Usher, know her, told me many years ago, said, Debbie, you can never get ahead of it, you just gotta try to run behind.
That's right. That's exactly right. We don't clean the house to get it clean and then what? Be done forever. That's not the goal. The goal is to keep it somewhat clean, keep it a little clean, keep on going. We do have some goals in life. Money's not really a goal. It doesn't need to be, I should say. Money does not need, we don't need to say, all right, when I get this much money, what? I'm good. If I can ever get this much money, I'm good. What has experience, maybe not our own experience, but just experience in life and maybe experience with others, what has experience told us about money? That's right, Rick. You always want more, okay? So people always want more. Now, hopefully, like I said, as Christians, hopefully that's not what drives us. But you don't really have a goal with money, okay? You don't really have a goal with money. Paul talks about a goal here. As Christians, what? We do have a goal, okay? We do have a goal as Christians. Our goal is to go to heaven, all right? Now, once again, that's not why, this is where it gets a little complicated. That's not why we do everything we do. If we ask somebody, why are you helping the poor, you say, what? So I can go to heaven. We know that's not the case. Why?
Because hopefully you've got a relationship with the Lord, that you've got a lot of other motivation besides just the reward you're going to get.
Yep.
If you love somebody, you don't just do it because they're going to do something for you. You do it because you love them and care for them.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
no, you go, finish up.
No, that's pretty much.
Well, and I was going to say, and we also know that what? We're not tallying. We're not keeping up with how many good things we do. It's not about how many good things we do. It's about, like Stan said, it's a process. Now, our goal is heaven, but that's not why we do everything we do. Our goal is to, you can kind of push that down a little bit to an earthly setting and say, our goal is to be like Jesus. Our goal is to live for Jesus. Our goal is to walk in the light as He is in the light. Okay? And that's hard to define. Heaven's a little easier to define. Now, what it is and what it looks like, we don't know. But a goal of getting to heaven, that's a concrete thing. Okay? We can say we want to get to heaven. Living like Jesus is something that it changes a lot. It's a daily thing we have to look at. But we do press on. Conversations, your author talks about this. Conversations need to be on what is to be done, not what is done or what has been done. All right. When you, I want to talk about a church here. I won't talk about any individual church. We can even use our church here as an example. When we meet to plan, whether it's the elders or whether it's anybody here, when we meet to plan and to talk about the state of the church, Do we spend the first hour talking about all the stuff we've done in the past year? We talk about all the things the church has done in the past? I hope not. Because what? That's in the past. Okay? That's in the past. Pressing on, there is a part of pressing on that has to do with forgetting about the past. The good and the bad. All right? Not just the good, not just the bad, but pressing on deals with forgetting about the good and the bad of the past, and you plan for the future. If you're going to have if you're going to have a meeting for something, and all you do is talk about the past, what's going to happen when that meeting's over? You've accomplished nothing. Okay? You've accomplished nothing. If all you do is talk about what's done in the past, you've accomplished nothing. Now, could you walk out of there feeling good? Maybe. You might walk out of that meeting feeling kind of, man, we have all this stuff we've done. But what have you really accomplished? Nothing. You haven't really accomplished anything. So pressing on has a lot to do with forgetting about the past and planning for the future and moving on and trying to get better. I think of, when I was talking about this, when I wrote this point, I think of the old monkey in The Lion King. All right, everybody think, he whacks him on the head with that thing, and he says, why'd you do that? Doesn't matter. Why? It's in the past. It's in the past. All right? I've always thought that was pretty neat, So that kind of plays into this. If it's in the past, don't mean we forget it. Don't mean it doesn't affect us a little bit. But in our pressing on, what Paul's talking about here, in our pressing on, we got to give up the past. Okay? We got to give up the past. Thoughts on that?
That's easier said than done.
Good point, Rick. I was gonna say good point, Rick. That's a good point. Glad you said that. It's easier said than done. Okay? We have to try, we have to do our best, but we're humans. And we're gonna remember things, and the things we remember are gonna affect us a little bit. So we have to try. Easier said than done, but not impossible. Not something we can't overcome. But it is hard.
Fall back into it. Don't beat yourself up over it, but like you said, get up and put your foot forward. That's true. Keep going.
Learn from it. We can learn from it. We can learn from things, good and bad, that's happened in the past. But I don't want you to think like what Rick said. I'm not sitting here telling you, forget about it, it's over, you move on. Well, yeah, that's great in theory, but it's hard sometimes. But we need to try that. We need to try to move on, because if we don't, it will stagnate, and we won't bear good fruit. That's the last thing. Believe it or not, all this is in the introduction. We're getting ready to start reading the first three verses here. To bear fruit, we have to press on. Okay, we don't bear fruit by living in the past, and we are told to bear good fruit here on this earth. Right. Anything else before we read? That's a lot of you put a whole lot in there, but we do want to look at the verses here that Paul talks about. So let's read 12, 13, and 14 here as we get into that section a little bit. Not that I have already attained or am already perfected, but I press on, that I may lay hold of that for which Christ Jesus has also laid hold of me. Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended, but one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and teaching forward to those things which are ahead, I press towards the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Very similar to what we've talked about. Nothing surprising in there to what Paul said. Paul does emphasize the one thing we just talked about right there, is that forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things that are ahead. Okay? So when we talk about pressing on, we have to, like I said, we have to move forward. Does that mean that you don't ask for help with things that have happened in the past? No. You can seek help, you can seek counsel, you can do all kinds of things. There's all kinds of ways that you can try to deal with things that happened in the past, if they are things that still affect you at this time. But we can't live in them, we can't dwell in them, and we can't let them drag us down, because I put that right in the place where we talked about earlier. You can't stay stagnant, because there's no such thing as stagnant. All right, there's no such thing. Some of us in here are at that point of retirement, little before, little after. I retired a few years ago, but I've kept working. Doty just retired. Todd's close, right? This week, there we go. Okay, Todd's close. We got some in here that some are retired, some haven't. What do you always hear about retirement? Tell me anything you hear.
You don't have as much time.
Okay, as you thought you did. That's a good point, Rick. I have heard a number of, this is not relating to the lesson, but it's still interesting. I've heard so many people say, I don't know how I had time to do it when I was working. I retired, I'm just busy as I was, you know. So yeah, when did you have time to do all that? But we also know that if you retire and do nothing, what happens? This is a medically proven fact that what? Your mind, your body, it's not healthy. It's not healthy to work all your life and then stop and do nothing, okay? Hobbies, family, exercise, a little part-time job, whatever, whatever. It is necessary for us to keep moving forward. Once again, if you stop moving forward, bad things happen, spiritually and physically, both. And that's a lot of what Paul's talking about here. Yes.
Earlier today, as we sat here, I was kind of thinking about this very point of retirement. I looked around the room, and there's a few folks that aren't at that point yet.
Right.
Most of them are either right there at it, or we're close enough that we're thinking about it. And it's a very practical application of today's lesson. So, who am I going to be when it comes to my relationship with the Lord and my service in the kingdom? Who am I going to be when life is at a different place?
Mhm.
You know, and it's something it's been on my mind a whole lot. I've been thinking about it because I don't want to be guilty of quitting or be guilty of using, I'm too old anymore, I can't do that. I don't want to be guilty of those kinds of things. I want to find something that I can do at this point in my life. I want to do it, hopefully do it to the best of my ability, whatever that might be. So I think for the people in this audience, this is a very
Yep.
relevant kind of thing where a lot of us are.
That's right.
I'm getting pretty close to being 70 years old. I don't think that excuses me from having responsibilities in the kingdom of the Lord. I want to be a worker.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you said, Stan. It's almost lockstep with what Paul's talking about here.
70 years old, that's prime of life.
That's prime of life. You'd take 70 right now, wouldn't you, Ken? Better believe.
I might have once said that.
Prime of life. That's right. That's right. And Kenny. I mean, use Kenny's example. Kenny obviously can't do what he could do 20 years ago, right? But still useful in the kingdom? Absolutely. Absolutely. Kenny's wisdom, Kenny's, getting here, and Miss Anita as well, coming to church and being examples for these young people and things, there's so much, we just keep on, just keep on being a part. Just because you can't do what you used to could, doesn't mean you stop.
Finding that balance in your mind, because your mind is always so much younger than your body.
Yes. Oh, I agree. That's a good
So
point.
that's a struggle.
It is. That's right. That's right.
I'm talking about those of us who've gotten old, not the young.
I think even young ones, I think when you're 40, you think you're still 20. When you're 60, you think you're still 40, rough.
But that becomes a personal struggle.
It is. That's right.
To me, though, we have to be willing to live with, or we'll find ourselves. We talked about time, and I don't disagree with what Rick said necessarily. But then again, all of a sudden, I'm not getting up, the first thing I do is go in the cheat line.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I'm gonna do something else with that time.
Mhm.
What's it
It's gonna be.
What's it gonna be? Well, if I just let it happen, it's
rearranged. And if you don't use it, it'll go by either way. You know, it's going to go by either way. You can choose to use it or not to use it. Talk about Paul a little bit. You know, I wonder if Paul ever worked. You know, Paul was in jail, I know, at least a year there in Rome, or close to a little under a year, 2 years. Yeah, I thought it was a little over 2 years. Do you think Paul ever thought, and it would be tough for me to not think about all the mission we know about Paul's missions and the churches he started? Do you ever think Paul questioned, God, couldn't you use me a lot more somewhere else than here in jail for 2 years? You know, I could be out planting churches. I could be visiting these churches that I've planted. I could be doing a lot of good things. Now, we know Paul was doing good things while he was in jail. But you got to think Paul was thinking, you know, I can only talk to the people now basically that come to me. You know, how can God, how can you let me waste away here in prison when I want to be out working more for you, you know? And I don't notice that attitude in Paul. As a human being, I can't imagine Paul not thinking that. I can't imagine us not thinking that possibly. But knowing Paul's mind and knowing how much he liked to preach and how much he liked to visit the churches he started, I'm not sure that couldn't be on his mind. But I don't see it affecting Paul. You know, we can get in that position too. We can get in the position of feeling sorry for ourselves. And I don't see that with Paul. I don't see Paul feeling sorry for himself. Instead, it's what? I'll do what I can where I am.
Here's the very last verse of the book of Acts. He lived there 2 whole years at his own expense and welcomed all who came to him, proclaiming the kingdom of God and teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ with all boldness and without hindrance.
That's right. That's right. You know, could have been doing that all over the world or over the known world at the time. But hey, here I am, so I got to do what I can do. You know.
Or there's one person that needed him.
Yeah.
That's one.
That's right. That's right. That's right. You know, we can apply that to our lives. Throw any scenario you want. I don't want to throw anything out there, get people thinking about, you know, I just don't want any negative thoughts necessarily, but think about somewhere you could be like Paul, anything in your life. Maybe it's a physical disability. Maybe it's a mental, whatever it is. Okay, well, I'm stuck here with this, so what? I can't help anybody. I'm done. You know, I'm too old to get out and help up at church, and I'm too old for this, or I'm too, you know, not physically able to do this, and that's not pressing on. You might not be able to do as much as you used to, but you can still do something. You know, you can still do something.
The truth of the matter is, when Paul was a free man, I think maybe Ephesus, he spent about 2.5 years in Ephesus. I know he spent 2 years, 2.5 years somewhere. So I think you hear that old saying, when in Rome.
Yeah.
And I think Paul would have said, hey, this is where I am.
Yep.
I'll be doing what I do while I'm here until the Lord decides for me to go somewhere else.
That's right. That's right. And he didn't rest. He also didn't rest what he'd done in the past. You know, that's brought up in this lesson right here. Let's go ahead and I'll reread here a little bit. Brethren, verse 13, brother, I do not count myself to have apprehended. All right, that's a little odd way to say that, but I do not count myself as to have apprehended. I have not got everything. I have not got everything figured out. But one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to things that are ahead. So once again, part of moving on is you know, not resting on our laurels. You can look at your past a lot of different ways, but a couple of ways you can look at it negatively and say all these things that have happened to me, I've had this happen to me in life, or that happened to me in life, and that can hinder you going forward. But flip that 180 degrees. You can have a lot of accomplishments. You can have a lot of things accomplished in life, and you can basically have done all your you've met all your worldly goals. You've had a career, whatever, name all these things. So what's the danger there? Opposite of all these things have happened to me, so I'm just done. You've done all these things, and what? I'm done. I've accomplished everything. I've raised a family. I'm retired. I'm going to look back at all these great things I've done and be happy. That's just as dangerous, if not more, than not moving on.
That's that rich,
Yeah.
that rich farmer that built.
Yeah. Yeah.
Built bigger.
Yeah, yeah. There's we can't let the negative things that have happened in our past affect us, and we can't stop because we're there. We can't say, "Whew, I've made it." Anybody ever said, "Whew, I've made it"? I don't think so. I think we know we've not made it. I think we know we've not made it. Go ahead and read the last two. Therefore, let us, as many as are mature, have this mind. If in anything you think otherwise, God will reveal even this to you. Nevertheless, to the degree that we have already attained, let us walk by the same rule and the same mind. Like I said, we've got to just keep moving on. I've already talked about the things revealed. This talks about God will reveal even this to you. I do think God allows us to look at scriptures and use our life experiences and maybe see them differently than we did 20 years ago. Not letting the world affect us, but let God affect us, and read the Bible and say, you know what, 20 years ago, here's what I thought about that, but after my experiences, I kind of look at that differently now. And I've done that with a lot of things. Maturity brings that to us. And what's the main thing? I think the main thing maturity brings us is we see what really matters. I think immature early in life, we look at that church over there has got this little issue, and I don't think I like that, and I don't think I want to be a part of that. And when we grow and mature, what do we see? The things that really matter. We see the things that really matter, and I think that's a difference. That's a big deal right there. I had something. Another good way to kind of apply that, but I think that is part of pressing on is knowing what really matters and not getting in an argument about what color the carpet is, or not getting in an argument about what songs we sing on Sunday morning, but really talking about what's important. And that's, like I said, spiritual maturity. It includes having hard conversations. Anybody ever shied away from a religious conversation because you didn't feel maybe that you were adequately prepared or something like that? Maturity, I think, lets us have these hard conversations. And if we don't agree 100%, we can not agree 100%. There's a few things we have to agree on. There's some things we have to agree on, but we can be brothers and sisters and not agree on every little thing, okay? And I think that's one place that maturity really comes in. Having a proper mindset. Paul talks about having a proper mindset. That's another factor with moving on. We have to look at things correctly and look at things, the way they need to. Being focused and basically just never giving up. That's kind of what the author pushes there at the very end. Being focused on where we are, what we're doing, never giving up, always moving on. I love the two applications here. There are two applications here the author uses of traits we have that helps us press on. I think we have established in the last 40 minutes how important pressing on is. Well, what's some things that can help us do that? Humility. We've already talked about humility in the past lessons. Paul does a whole thing on humility. Humility can help us press on. If we're not humble and we think we know everything or we think we've accomplished everything, then we are hindering our ability to continue to grow. So humility is a very big thing. And look at the second one. Christians are expected to develop spiritual maturity. Those who do not are easily distracted by insignificant matters. I knew that's where it was. That's what I was thinking of when I was talking about putting the first things first. Definitely a adversary to pressing on is getting distracted. We get mired down in a small issue. We get mired down in a personality conflict, and it keeps us from growing spiritually. All right, so humility and not being distracted are two things that really can help a Christian kind of move forward. There's actually some good discussion questions here, and the first one says, how can the past hinder us? We've kind of already covered that. What can congregations do to make sure they are not distracted from the most important things? I think you just have to keep it in the forefront of your mind. I think you have to really, really know what you think are the important things, and I think it's human nature for us to be distracted by small things. How do we help that? I think noticing it is how we help it. Having something click in our brain that says what? Oh, wait a minute, this isn't that important. You know, this isn't that important. If we don't have that thing that clicks in our brain that says, I've got my eye off the big picture, then we keep on, we sometimes call it going down a rabbit hole. We keep on going down that rabbit hole of somebody or something or some issue, and we don't get out of that rabbit hole and see the big picture. So that's something we have to develop. All right, I knew I would do it. It's five verses, and I went long, Stan. So there we go.